You colleagues, honorable members, colleagues from the National Treasury and colleagues from the FFC. Let me once again apologize that you had to wait for members to join the meeting. There was an indication yesterday that the meeting will start at 10 o'clock, but after considering the fact that members must at some point travel to Parliament, we decided to change the time to 9 o'clock. We profusely apologize for the confusion. Secondly, colleagues, I am not in a good space can continue with the meeting. I came to officially apologize to your good selves. I am currently at school, but mine was just to render an apology and open the meeting. Then I'm going to request that Honorable Ndlovu holds the fort for me as I have a class that started at 9 o'clock. But also it was my responsibility to report to the team as to where I will be during the time of the meeting. Honorable members of the committee, officials from the National Treasury and FFC, support staff and any stakeholders present, ladies and gentlemen, good morning and welcome to the meeting. The committee meets today to engage on the 2026 Appropriations Bill, which is one of the most important instruments through which Parliament exercises its constitutional authority over the public finances. In terms of Section 213, subsection 2 of the Constitution, no money may be withdrawn from the National Revenue Fund except through an act of Parliament. The bill before us, therefore, carries a significant constitutional, fiscal, and governance implications for the country. As the Select Committee on Appropriations, our role is to concur process is not, and to make sure that process is not merely procedural, but it interrogates whether the proposed allocations are credible, they are sustainable, properly aligned to national priorities, and capable of translating into measurable service delivery outcome. The committee is equally mindful that this bill is being considered within a constrained fiscal environment characterized by weak economic growth, increasing infrastructure and service delivery pressures, rising debt obligations, and ongoing concerns regarding expenditure efficiency and implementation capacity across the states. We therefore, colleagues, look forward to a robust and constructive engagement with the National Treasury and the FFC on the composition, provincial and local transfer sustainability and implementation of 2026 Appropriations Bill. Colleagues, I'm going to request Mr. Nodada to take us through the apologies. As he takes us through the apologies, welcome Honorable Ndlovu to continue with the meeting. Can I get an indication whether I'm allowed to step off, honorable members, and attend to class?
Noted, Chair.
Thank you very much, Honorable Sibisa. Mr. Nodada, and then Honorable Ndlovu, over to you.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Good morning, Chair. Good morning, honorable members. Good morning, Chairperson, Dr. Mbava and colleagues. Chairperson and honorable members, we have an apology from Deputy Minister Sarupan. He is unable to join the meeting due to National Treasury commitments. From the committee's side, we have an apology from Honorable Ryder, an apology from Honorable Majola, and Honorable Siwisa has indicated that even though she's part of the meeting, but at a later stage, she will have to log off from the meeting. Those are the few apologies that we have, Chairperson. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nodada. Greetings to everyone. Greetings to our chairperson. Greetings to the National Treasury delegation and also the FFC, and greetings to yourself, honorable members on the visual platform. Honorable Nodada, Mr. Nodada, can you please flag the agenda? Thank you very much. Can I now hand over to the National Treasury to brief the committee? Thank you.
Good morning, Honourable Chairperson and Honourable members of the committee. My name is Ulrika Britton. I'm the DDG for Public Finance. I will take you through the presentation for today. I am hoping that my slides are now visible. Honourable members, today's presentation focuses largely on some of the changes in the clauses of the bill, and then we're also going to highlight the largest allocations that we have within the bill that is set out in Schedule 1, set out what is in Schedule 2, and then just for information purposes, highlight the specifically earmarked allocations that are provided for in the bill. The legal framework for the appropriation bill, as the chairperson had in her introductory comments had stated, comes out of the Constitution, where money withdrawn from the National Revenue Fund can only be done through an Act of Parliament. This is further enabled in the PFMA and is also referenced in the Money Bills Act. And what this bill does is it appropriates funds for the financial year 1 April 2026 to 31 March 2027. The bill includes important definitions that aligns with other parts of the budget. In the definitions for Section 1, we highlight and we define in the same way that we do in the Division of Revenue Bill, the allocations in kind, the indirect grants that's set out in Schedule 6, the Schedule 4 and 5 allocations that we have as the direct grants, and in the same way that we talk about specifically earmarked allocations, those specific purpose allocations for those conditional grants. In the definitions, we also indicate what the purpose of the allocations are, and that is defined by the vote and the main division of the vote. It's also defined by the economic classification, and this is important relative to the linkages we have in the Public Finance Management Act around authorized and unauthorized expenditure, where the definition for unauthorized expenditure includes spending that is not in accordance with the purpose of that allocation. The bill also separates the classifications for the different what we call economic classifications in accordance with the economic reporting framework, a format that is set out in the PFMA, where it defines current payments, payments for capital assets, payments for financial assets, and transfers and subsidies. It empowers for the earmarking of specific allocations, and it also provides for how contingencies can be allocated within the fiscal framework. Section 2 of the bill sets out the appropriations for the requirements of the state, and this is defined by the allocations appropriated from the National Revenue Fund for the 26-27 year as set out in Schedule 1. These appropriations are subject to the PFMA, it will take, and until the bill takes effect, Section 29 of the PFMA enables expenditure to happen subject to Section 7 of the 2025 Appropriation Act. And this is in relation to just spending that is can be authorized until the legislation or this legislation for this financial year is passed. We also have included in the bill a Schedule 2 allocations, and these are allocations to government components and other segments of the budgets that we treat as the main division, and it gets subjected to the same requirements of this act this bill once enacted, and the Public Finance Management Act. Section 3 limits the use of specifically earmarked allocations. That highlights that it can only be used for the purpose indicated, and can only be amended by an Act of Parliament. Section 4 of the bill empowers the Minister of Finance to set conditions to all allocations. And this is for all allocations other than conditional allocations in terms of the Division of Revenue Act. The Minister is then empowered to stop or withhold any allocations if conditions imposed are not met. It is also, at the request of the accounting officer, the Minister may amend allocations or can withdraw those conditions associated with those allocations. And then also included in Section 4 of the bill is just a requirement for the National Treasury to disclose in our quarterly expenditure report to Parliament on any stoppage of funds in relation to conditions that have not been met. Section 5 of the bill deals with the use of unspent funds. And this really expands on the requirements around specifically and exclusively allocated funds, and the provisions for the shifting of funds between main divisions set out in Section 43 of the PFMA. So it expands in relation to approving the reduction of transfers, the reduction of payments for capital assets, and the reductions for financial assets within the same vote. These are not provided for in Section 43 of the PFMA, so we are providing for that here in Section 5. It also allows for the conversion of direct and indirect grants to align with the economic classification, and this is consistent not only with the purpose here, but also with the provisions provided for in the Division of Revenue Act. It limits the amounts to be shifted between main divisions, and where shifts are beyond 8% within main divisions, it does provide for the authority of for the Minister of Finance to change those classifications between main divisions. Section 5 then further goes on that would allow the Minister of Finance to shift more than 8% under very specific circumstances, and this is in relation to mostly under disaster conditions, where the expenditure is unforeseeable and unavoidable in nature, and if it is of an exceptional nature, it is likely to cause some prejudice to service delivery, the Minister of Finance may be authorized through this provision to shift funds between main divisions of more than 8% from the division that it comes from. Under these circumstances, where we also have disaster circumstances, or when it is of an exceptional nature, with the concurrence of Cabinet, the Minister of Finance is then also empowered to move money between main divisions. And if funds are moved between main divisions, we would have to include this in a special appropriation bill within 120 days of approval. This is not dissimilar, different from what we have in relation to other provisions where the Minister of Finance is required, and I'll get to that in Section 6 on tabling an appropriation, or in terms of Section 16 of the Appropriation of the Public Finance Management Act. Any of these approvals must be disclosed in the next quarterly report that we do to Parliament that goes to the Committee on Appropriations. Section 6 authorized the Minister of Finance to approve expenditure that's included in the contingencies but not allocated to a specific vote. This is, again, as I had said, when it is unforeseeable and unavoidable, and it is of an exceptional nature. The amount that is limited to what is included in the fiscal framework. This becomes a direct charge against the National Revenue Fund until we get Parliament's approval. The Minister may also set conditions to any of these allocations as provided for in Section 4. And as I had said, we have 120 days to submit a table and appropriation bill for Parliament's approval of these allocations. And again, the standard reporting requirements on this then exist. Section 7 just enables legislation for the next financial year. So as I previously mentioned, where we have Section 29 of the PFMA, Section 7 then also allows that for expenditure to happen from 1 April 2027 until the 2027 appropriation bill is then enacted. This is similar to provisions that we have in the Division of Revenue Act when this takes effect. So it will enable for not just expenditures to happen in relation to what's in the appropriation bill, but also to what is within the Division of Revenue Amendment Bill, the Division of Revenue Bill and the Division of Revenue Amendment Bill when that then takes effect. Section 8 just deals with the Minister's authority to delegate these powers to, and these are limited, of course, to most clauses in the bill except Section 9. And the Minister is basically authorized to delegate to an employee of the National Treasury. This must be in writing and can be subject to conditions that the Minister imposes. The Minister may also be authorized to authorize an employee to sub-delegate these delegations, but it doesn't take away from the Minister's responsibility to exercise the delegated power or to perform the authorized duty as set out in both the PFMA and in the Appropriation Bill. All these delegations may be withdrawn, and the minister may overturn any decision that an employee has made as a result of the delegation. Section 9 just allows for regulations. And then just some details, honorable members, in relation to the allocations in Schedule 1. So what this bill does is it proposes a total appropriation of 1.2 trillion rand. The largest of this is transfers and subsidies, and I will explain in the next slides why this is the case. And mostly because of transfers that are made to households in terms of the social grants, which is why the social development appropriation or allocation is the largest. The second component around all of this that makes transfers and subsidies quite high are the transfers that we make on the vote of the Department of Cooperative Governance for the local government equitable share. By economic classification, the top 10, so in the top left-hand graph, where we have the top 10 allocations for compensation of employees, the largest by far goes to police, and the second largest to defense. In relation to goods and services, again, police and defense gets the largest allocations by goods and services. And as I had explained in the previous slide, in relation to transfers and subsidies, the transfers that we make for the social grants and the local government equitable share makes up a significant chunk. The next highest transfer here would be to higher education. Half of the transfer that we see for higher education here relates to the transfers that are made, or just about half, a little less than that, to the National Student Financial Aid Scheme, and then others go to a whole range of other transfers that gets to various institutions. In relation to the capital budgets, water and sanitation gets the largest allocation, and this is for the indirect grants that's related to Schedule 6 allocations in the Division of Revenue Act for the Regional Bulk Infrastructure Grant and the Water Services Infrastructure Grant. And after that, in the same way that it is for health, a large component of that is for the indirect grants that sits in health, whereas for police and defense, these are for their own internal facilities in the same way that it is for justice and a whole range of other national departments. Then just the allocations that we have for interest and rent on land, a lot of this, so in relation to the three departments that we have allocations for interest and rent on land, this relates mostly to payments that we make to for the PPP. So this is the monthly payments or that they honor in relation to that agreement. And then the payments that we have for financial assets in relation to the National Treasury is for share subscriptions to the African Development Bank, and to transport. This is for SANRAL's obligations in relation to the debt related to the Gauteng Freeway Improvement Program. Then what the bill also includes in Schedule 2 are allocations to government components, and we do this just to strengthen governance in terms of the Public Finance Management Act, where we treat programs and sub-programs in the same way that we do for main divisions of votes. This would then mean that things like environment rules would apply in the same way, and these are the allocations that we have for different government components on the respective votes as highlighted in the table. And that is where I end. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Britton. Thank you very much. And now check are you doing only that presentation, or is there another presentation?
Chair, that was the presentation that highlights the full extent of the appropriation bill under consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Can we also request on our members, I'm not sure, Mr. Nodada, do we take another presentation, or the members will go to the question and answer session?
Chair, in the past, the committee resolved to take the presentations back to back,
Both of
but
them.
it's yes,
Okay.
it's in the hands of the chairperson and the committee to decide. But
It's fine.
FF's Dr. Mbava and the team, they are ready to proceed.
Okay. Let me hand over to Dr. Mbava to brief the committee. Thank you.
Your microphone is still mute, Dr. Mbava. Sorry,
Yes, no,
chairperson, for that.
yes, thank you so much. I was just saying that to the chairperson Lovu, we got the same brief on dress code.
Yay. Yay. I can see that.
Yes, thank you so much, Chair.
I
Thank you so much.
I hope Honorable Sibisa will be happy to see us like this today.
Yes.
Uh,
Thank you so much, Chairperson. Thank you for welcoming the Financial and Fiscal Commission to brief the committee. Good morning to all the honorable members, also to the colleagues from National Treasury. FFC team, may I have the slides flighted?
Thank you, Chair. Can I please ask for permission to share?
Okay.
Mr. Nodada, you are assisting.
Yes, chairperson, I've given Mr. Malungan the host rights. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chairperson. Today we are in front of yourselves to present on the 2026 Appropriation Bill, providing the analysis of the Financial and Fiscal Commission. Thereafter, we'll also provide our recommendations to the committee. Next slide. In terms of our mandate, we are a constitutional institution mandated to provide advice on national legislation to provincial legislatures and to Parliament, which is yourselves, and any other authorities determined by national legislation. Next slide. Our recommendations, Chair and members, are grounded in the Constitution, specifically Section 214, mandates us to look at these specific issues when we look at the recommendations, issues of national interest, the needs of the provinces, and the developmental and other needs of local government and municipalities as well, amongst other things. Next slide. What we do on a day-to-day basis as the FFC, members will also be aware that the FFC pioneered the methodology and formula for dividing public finances equitable between national, provincial, and local government. The FFC is also mandated to advise Parliament on any division of revenue and on the national budget. What is important to note is that these recommendations assess the fiscal implications of new legislation, policy reforms, and also economic shocks that affect revenue distribution. Next slide. The FFC as well serves as a key referee in fiscal disputes between different spheres of government as part of our mandate. We also engage in performance monitoring and evaluation, where we look at the funding gaps, capacity constraints, and areas where fiscal reforms are needed. Next slide. Our key output is the work that we do, which is conducting research on intergovernmental fiscal relations, revenue sharing mechanism, and fiscal sustainability. Next slide. I now want to hand over to the team to take us through the appropriation bill. Thank you so much. Over to you, Chen and team.
Thank you, and thank you, Chair, and good morning, Honourable Chair and Honourable members of the Select Committee and all the other colleagues on the platform. If I may move to next slide and just sit on this slide for a little bit. I propose two I'd like to coin two questions. One is, isn't it high time for South Africa to consider, as my chairperson earlier stated, fiscal reforms, particularly in terms of the public finance management? And number two is whether we are, if we were, in terms of the parliament and in terms of the constitution, were to change or want to change these specific clauses in the bill of the fiscal and monetary bills, how would one do it at the legislative level? On the first question, that whether it's high time, I propose looking at this particular slide, and may I draw your attention to just the top, I would say 3 or 4 items there. Social developments constitute 24.9% of the entire fiscal bill, of the appropriation bill. Cooperative governance, 11%. Police, 10%, as also our colleagues from National Treasury pointed out, that it is highly cost of employees intensive and focused. And higher education. I'd like to look at these 4, for example, and think, just taking a step back and think how these national departments have been operating. I would say that their performances have been rather leaving a lot of room, I think, to desire for. Social developments have been embroiled in the most significant collapse and corruption in recent history. Cooperative governance of local governments is in significant trouble, both from the local government fiscal framework as well as a sustainable fiscal framework of that sphere. Police, I wouldn't say more about that because there are many commissions operating in that space. And higher education, I think the SETAs are in deep, deep, deep troubles, and so many of whom are not just labor intensive, but also taking up a lot of money and to do we don't know what that they have delivered. So on the first question is whether it's high time, just based on looking at these significant portions of the appropriation bills, isn't it high time for us to review and conduct fiscal reform, very stringent reviews, and re-looking at what are our instruments of fiscal controls in terms of the not just Public Finance Management Act, and also of some of the legislative powers that is vested in the Constitution in this Parliament. Which leads to the second question, that if we were, just as a thinking exercise for this select committee, esteemed select committee, to consider, because it is the same consideration that when we were briefing the Standing Committee on Appropriation on the appropriation bill, that that committee were considering, is that if the committees, parliamentary committees in Parliament, in the legislative branch of government, were to change, were wanting to change this appropriation bill, how would one do it? I think I just want to coin those 2 pieces of puzzle onto the table for the honorable chair members to consider, in recognizing, notwithstanding that how significant a trouble and problems that we may have in terms of this appropriation bill as we move forward. Let me then give it to Neo, my team, and Nosisa later to present to you our analysis on the appropriation bill. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chen. Good morning, Honorable Chairperson and honorable members. We will be taking you through the next slide of our analysis on the appropriation bill. However, taking over from what our head of research mentioned with regards to this slide. So the key emphasis that we want to bring to members, to bring to members' attention is that social spending protects household. However, we also notice that economic growth ultimately finances the social protection. Therefore, it is upon members that they reflect on whether the balance between the redistribution and growth is sustainable over the medium term. Also taking over from what our head of research emphasized. So moving to the next few slides, this is where we unpack the analysis on the 2026 appropriation bill. So in terms of this analysis, we looked at the percentage change between the allocations in the 2026 appropriation bill relative to the 2025 appropriation bill for the 2026-27 financial year. This allowed us to assess budget responsiveness and consistencies. So it is also for note and clarity that the 2025 appropriation bill allocations for 2026-27 are treated as the baseline. So to begin with, we look at a category of education, health, and social development. So firstly, based on basic education, we see a 5.2% increase for the 2026-27 financial year compared to budget 2025 baseline, following a marginal 0.9% overspending in 2024-25. So the focus remains on strengthening early childhood development with an additional 12.8 billion over the next 3 years. However, the Commission expresses concern despite those allocations about the poor quality of basic education in South Africa, as also reflected across a range of outputs, including the alarmingly low statistic that 81% of grade 4 learners are unable to read for meaning. As such, the Commission supports the efforts by the department to continue incrementally rolling out the mother tongue-based bilingual education strategy up to grade 7 over the medium term period. To further support this strategy's implementation, we also note that a 95 million rand is allocated over the medium term in the curriculum policy support and monitoring program. So moving along to higher education. So here we note a 0.5% downward adjustment for 2026-27 relative to the baseline, and this is in line with the 0.3% underspending. We also note that NSFAS received a 54.3 billion for funding approximately 744 learners, which is a downward revision from 58.1 billion in budget 2025 for 2026-27. And this further raises concerns regarding access to higher education. At the same time, we also note that the Minister of Finance acknowledged that the Skills Development Levy Funding Sector, Education and Training Authority, SETAs, and the National Skill Fund has not yielded the expected outcomes. And in response, the National Treasury has commissioned the Government Technical Advisory Center, GTEC, to conduct a comprehensive review of the national skills ecosystem in the year ahead. So the poor performance of SETAs is of concern also to the Commission, and with the planned review, aligns with the Commission's own view on the need for a comprehensive review of all SETAs, as previously ventilated in the Commission's submission to the Portfolio Committee on Higher Education. So moving along on health, health remains largely unchanged, as we see a 66.9 billion relative to the baseline, which is consistent with minor underspending. However, we also see that there are additional resources equaling 21.3 billion over the medium term, which is directed towards doctor compensation, service shortfalls, and the Commission welcomes that. However, we note that there is no targeted allocation to address South Africa's growing burden of non-communicable diseases, despite this being the leading cause of death. Moving to the economic and development votes. So firstly, we see that agriculture, rural development, and land reform votes in total received a minor 0.1% increase. for 2026-27 compared to what was outlined in budget 2025 for the same financial year. And this follows a total underspending of approximately 4% in 2024-25. National Treasury also announced that it is working with the Department of Agriculture to redirect approximately 400 million from underspent agricultural grants to combat the foot and mouth outbreak. So overall, we also note that the combined votes for mineral resources and energy declined by 8.5%, despite a prior underspending revealing a clear budgetary inconsistency. Despite this, several strategic development initiatives are being pursued, which includes the shale gas research, the Junior Mining Exploration Fund, and the electricity market reform. The Commission welcomes this development as critical to stimulating investment and economic growth. However, it underscores the need for more consistent and realistic funded planning. In terms of trade, industry, and competition, here we note a 14.3% increase for 2026-27 relative to the baseline, despite underspending of 3.3% in 2024-25. And this is largely driven by the extension of the Presidential Employment Initiative and the Social Employment Fund. So moving down to transport, we note a 5.9% increase, which is consistent with the 5.4% overspending in 2024-25. These major allocations are made to PRASA and rail recovery, which includes 23 billion for signaling upgrades and also 9.5 billion for rail operations. This further aligns with the Commission's prior recommendations on modernizing the rail system. And moving along to the peace and security votes. So here we note that the defense experiences a 1.6% decrease for 2026-27 relative to the baseline, despite nearly 12% overspending in 2024-25. This suggests structural underfunding combined with operational demands that exceed budget realities. So over the medium term, we also see that an additional 2.7 billion is allocated, including 857 million in 2026-27. So overall, these funds are directed towards maintaining core operational capabilities and supporting critical readiness requirements. The Commission also knows that a further 1 billion is channeled through the Criminal Asset Recovery Account, CARA, to support efforts to combat organized crimes. Moving along to the Home Affairs vote, here we note a 10.5% increase focusing on the digitization and digital identity system, including funding for the employment of 3,000 ICT qualified youth. In addition, the Commission knows that the Border Management Authority receives an extra 990 million over the medium term, which is inclusive of a 316 million in 2026-27 to build capacity by filling 738 positions. However, in addition to that, the Commission commends this modernization focus as critical to addressing fraud and improving service delivery. We note that the Office of Chief Justice also received an increase of 24.7% to enable greater institutional independence and court modernization. And finally, we also note that the police vote received only a 0.4% increase for 2026-27 relative to its budget 2025 baseline. An additional 1 billion has been allocated to the police service through the CARA fund to support the fight against organized crime, and also an allocation welcomed by the Commission. Furthermore, the police service will shift 894.2 million within its budget to enhance information and communication technology capabilities. On that note, Chair, I will hand over to my colleague, Nosi, to continue with the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, honorable members. On the first, on
We
this
can't hear
slide,
you. I'm not sure if it's on my side, honorable members.
Can you
I
hear
get
me
an
now,
indication?
Honorable Chair?
Okay, yes, I can hear you now. Hello, Nosisa. You have muted yourself. I'm not sure if you are still speaking. Dr. Mbava, can you check Nosisa if she's still on the platform? Because we can't hear her. I'm not sure if she's speaking where she's okay.
I'm here, Chair, and I'm using Neo's laptop now.
Okay.
Yes,
Okay, can continue. Thank you.
thank you. So on this slide, we are showing that in 2026-27 financial year, the debt service costs decreased by 3.7% or 16.7 billion relative to the 2025 main budget. Honorable members, please note the decrease comes after an overspending of 1% in 2024-25, suggesting government's efforts to stabilize debt and manage borrowing costs may be yielding modest fiscal relief. Moving to the vote, the provincial equitable share, honorable members, and debt service cost allocation dominates by 57.6% and 37.2% respectively of the total direct charges. Then if we look on the diagram on the right, honorable members, it's where we're showing the difference between audited and the main budget, and also the budget of 2025 versus the budget of 2026. So to highlight there is that the judges' salaries increased by 95 million in the 2026-27 financial year relative to its baseline. However, the overspending of 12.6% in the 2024-25 indicate that the increase may not be sufficient to meet the organizational needs. In our submission for the 2025-26 honorable members, the Commission recommended that the Office of the Chief Justice and the Department of Justice undertake an audit to identify judicial shortages, citing the low level of efficiency across South African courts. Then on this slide, we demonstrate the special appropriation allocation. A total amount of about 8.5 billion was allocated, with 6.8 billion directed towards the transport sector. Included in that 6.8 was 5.5 billion directed to PRASA for rolling stock renewal and 1.8 billion for obligations to Gibela. The Commission notes, honorable members, the approval of the special appropriation to PRASA, which is earmarked to enable the agency to meet its contractual obligations and sustain its fleet renewal program. And then this reflects the ongoing efforts to restore rail and port infrastructure, which are critical for economic growth. And then also under this special appropriation, 1 billion was allocated to the National Treasury is for subscription to the International Finance Corporation, supporting the development, finance access, and global partnership. Another 700 million was allocated to communication and digital technologies to manage and oversee government's interest in the ICT public entities and the state-owned companies. And lastly, honorable members, an amount of also about 1 billion was allocated to Development Bank of Southern Africa to support a safe, reliable, and economical viable maritime transport sector through policy implementation and oversight of maritime public entities. Then moving to the recommendations, the Commission recommends that the department align budget submission more closely with actual expenditure patterns and announce policy reforms. To ensure accountability, the standing and the select committees on appropriations should exercise their oversight powers to summon departments reflecting persistent mismatches between spending performance and baseline revisions to account for these deviations. Secondly, the Commission reiterates its 2025 MTBPS and recommends that the government's infrastructure prioritization during the 2026-27 MTEF period be complemented by robust project delivery across the entire project building life cycle. And lastly, under this category, the Commission reiterates its recommendation that the Portfolio Committee on Higher Education and Training, in collaboration with the Department of Higher Education and Training, organized labor, employers, and professional bodies, conduct a comprehensive review to consolidate the SETAs to eliminate functional overlaps and duplications and more closely align training with the demands of the economy. And lastly, honorable members, moving to the recommendation with respect to the 2026 Special Appropriation Bill, given PRASA's history of procurement irregularities and financial mismanagement, the Commission recommends that the Parliament, through its Portfolio Committee on Transport and the Standing and Select Committees on Appropriations, exercise rigorous oversight over the entity's 5.8 billion allocation for rolling stock renewal, including the 1.8 for contractual obligations with Gibela, and monitor measurable progress towards increasing annual passenger trips. Thank you, Honorable Chair and Honorable Members. And with your permission, Honorable Chair, I would like to hand over to our Chairperson for concluding remarks. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nosisa. Chairperson, this appropriation bill is asking Parliament to appropriate approximately 1.2 trillion to various government departments. This is not money for JAM. This is taxpayers' money. And it's up to Parliament to satisfy itself that these government departments which are being allocated these amounts of money are delivering on our people's expectation in terms of service delivery. We are allocating 1.2 trillion, not billion, 1.2 trillion to various government departments. And we must ensure that these government departments meet the expectation, they deliver on the people's expectation that there is service delivery. Thank you so much, Chair.
Thank you very much, Dr. I wish you were doing the closing remark to one of the sessions of the Parliament meeting where everybody can listen to. And thank you very much. The 1.2 trillion is a lot indeed. And we must make sure that we emphasize that the department is using that money objectively and for the service of the community. I now open the platform to honorable members to ask Honorable Siwisa. I can see you. I don't see another hands. I will just note them as we continue. Honorable Siwisa.
No, thank you, Chair. Greetings, Chair. Greetings to Dr. Mbava. It's always an honor, Madam, to have you in our meetings so that you must guide us as to how to proceed and advise us on what needs to be done when it comes to the fiscal of this country. Chair, I've got only two questions that I'm going to pose. The first one, Chair, we all know that we've got a problem of infrastructure in South Africa. It's either our infrastructure is dilapidated, or our projects are never finished, or the projects are not done. They don't even kickstart. And now we've got allocations that have been done across education, health, human settlement, transport, and water and sanitation. And we know in basic education, we still have schools with buildings that are dilapidated. Not enough schools are being built. We still have a backlog when it comes to human settlement. Our transport infrastructure is a mess. I don't even want to speak about water and sanitation when we go to our reserves in our municipalities. And it means that money is being spent and we don't know how it's been spent. We just get boxes that are being ticked. What specific reforms has National Treasury implemented to improve the infrastructure planning, to deal with procurement readiness, to deal with project management, contract administration and expenditure monitoring across national departments which are receiving the major capital allocations? Number two, Chair, we also know that there's a problem of non-compliance that happens, and every time departments do get the money, but there is a problem of non-compliance. In light of that, how frequent does the National Treasury has to stop, amend, or withdraw earmarked allocation for the past years? And what lessons have emerged regarding weak planning, poor expenditure management, and implementation failures? Those are my only two questions, Chair. Thank you very much.
Honorable Sibisa, I thought you'll appreciate our dress code today.
Yes,
Thank you.
I see, Chair. You and Doc are very proper today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Brett.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. Good morning to National Treasury as well as the FFC. As always, we welcome the inputs and the presentations. Madam Chair, with your permission, I'm going to leave my camera off this morning to avoid the problems that I had yesterday. Madam Chair, I have 4 questions to National Treasury. Now, being a select committee from the NCOP, our focus is on provinces and the effect that the bill has on provinces. Now, first of all, how is National Treasury managing increasing fiscal pressure associated, with salaries of officials and departments? We note that salaries consume a huge portion of departments' budgets. In many instances, this is crowding out funds available for infrastructure and maintenance and service delivery in general, and this is unsustainable. Secondly, I want to touch on appropriations to provinces and the provincial equitable share. Now, all provinces indicated in their negotiating mandates that they are concerned about the use of incorrect data to determine provincial equitable share. The Eastern Cape, for example, indicated that they are losing around about 26 billion rands as a result. Is National Treasury actively pursuing better data to rectify this deficiency? Thirdly, I want to touch on the recent flooding caused in the Eastern Cape and the Western Cape, and these caused a massive destruction, an ongoing destruction. For example, the R62 between Hubertina and Karedo in the Eastern Cape is currently still closed. Now, that area, the Longkloof, is the second largest exporter of soft fruit in this country. I received concerning information this morning that it will take another 5 weeks to construct a temporary road. This small rural community cannot absorb another 5 weeks without access road to the nearest port. And damage to the local agriculture sector in this community alone stands at around about 160 million rands due to the flood. I want to know, how can National Treasury assist communities in urgent need of infrastructure repairs, such as the Langkloof? Secondly, what safeguards does National Treasury apply to ensure that contingency allocations are not used to compensate for weak planning and spending, and that money is spent on something else? And thirdly, how can procurement processes in such cases be expedited, and can National Treasury assist in this instance? And then my last question is focusing on transfers through conditional grants, and I'm referring here to slides 19 to 24. Has National Treasury introduced additional oversight and support to make sure that conditional grants allocations are linked to implementation readiness, realistic procurement plans, and measurable outputs? And if so, what are those additional oversight and support plans? Thank you, Madam Chair.
Honourable Sart.
Thank you, Honourable Chair, and thank you very much to National Treasury and the FFC for the presentations. I've just got a couple of questions that I'm going to run through. Honourable Chairperson, I like you and the Honourable Ladies' red dresses, and next time when come later, I will see you maybe a nice blue dresses.
Yeah. Dr. Baba, the message is clear.
I know you look also good in blue. Okay, Chairperson.
Thank you.
I'm just going to answer a couple of questions. National Treasury indicates that 73% of the 1.214 trillion appropriations consist of transfers and subsidies. How confident is National Treasury that departments, provinces, and municipalities and public entities receiving these transfers actually have the institutional capacity to convert locations into measurable service delivery outcomes, rather than merely recycling underperformance from one financial year to the next? And then, can National Treasury provide examples where poor implementation capacity directly influenced future baseline reductions or conditional interventions? And then, Chairperson, South Africa does not appear to suffer from a shortage of infrastructure allocations alone, but rather from weak project preparation, procurement failures, contractor collapse, and delayed implementation. The question is, what practical reforms has National Treasury introduced to ensure departments to do not continue budgeting for projects they are not institutionally ready to execute? On the compensation, I think that was one that was touched on. And the question on that one, on the compensation and salaries, is National Treasury considering stricter staffing discipline or productivity-linked reforms within departments that continue to expand wage pressures without corresponding improvements in outcomes? And then, Honourable Chairperson, on the PRASA modernization, what measurable indicators can Parliament realistically use over the next 12 to 24 months to determine whether commuters are actually experiencing safer, more reliable, and economically productive rail services? And at what point does Treasury intervene when allocations repeatedly fail to translate into operational improvements? And then Chairperson on conditional grants. Conditional grants continue to suffer from delayed spending, rollovers, and weak procurement readiness. Has Treasury considered introducing stricter implementation readiness tests before large infrastructure grants are approved or expanded? And then I think it's FFC, social wage and economic growth. The budget remains heavily weighted towards the social wage, while productive sectors such as agriculture, small business development, and industrial development receives comparatively small allocations. How sustainable is this fiscal structure in the long term if economic growth and employment creation remains weak? Chairperson, and then just one or two for the FFC also. The FFC presentation notes that productive sectors such as agriculture, science, and innovation, small business development, and trade receive relatively small shares of the national appropriation. Does the Commission believe South Africa's budget is becoming too consumption-driven and insufficiently growth-driven? The FFC repeatedly highlights inconsistencies between departmental spending performance and revised baselines. In the Commission's view, which departments currently present the greatest fiscal risk due to persistent poor expenditure management and weak implementation capacity? Then the Commission notes that 81% of grade 4 learners still cannot read for meaning despite increased allocation to education. Does the Commission believe Parliament should place greater emphasis on measurable educational outcome rather than simply increasing allocations year after year? I think that was my questions. There was one other one that I actually wanted to ask, but I will come to that maybe later. Okay, we'll stick to that onward, Chairperson.
Honorable Sart, are you done?
I'm finished.
Honorable Sart?
I'm finished, Honorable Chairperson.
Okay, I see your mic is still on. Okay, thank you. Honorable Hadebe?
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson. Good morning to everyone who's on the platform. Chairperson, I'd like to welcome both the presentations from the National Treasury and the FFC, and then really appreciate their cutting-edge type of input which they've presented to this committee. But Chair, what I'd like to say is that I concur with my colleagues when coming to the issue of job creation. You can see that the budget is skewed towards social spending. But until when are we going to spend on social spending when we don't stimulate the economy well? Because what is critical here, if we don't spend enough on trading industry, if we don't spend enough on agriculture, if we don't spend enough on maritime or on fisheries, it means that we are shooting ourselves on the foot, in particular when coming to the issue of raising the forex for the country. So both the Commission and the National Treasury, what is the percentage which must be done to increase the budget of these departments? I know just like mineral resources, there's mainly around regulatory framework which they provide. But we know very well that here in South Africa, the mining industry is one of the key anchors of our economy. So what must be done in order to balance the issue of social spending and also stimulating the economy at the same time? The other part here is the issue of the spending on the security cluster. I think that we raised this thing long time ago, as far back as 2010, towards 2014, when we persistently asked, we said to the National Treasury in particular that we cannot afford to underspend on the National Defence Force. Right now, as we had a presentation yesterday from the Select Committee, from the Joint Standing Committee on Defence, you could see that the basis of our defense force, the equipment and everything, you cannot renew itself. And once you cannot have a strong defense force and strong police force, people will do whatever they want to do. Right now, we are faced with this issue of illegal immigration. If the police, the defense force had the proper capacity, this thing will not be happening here. So it means that irrespective of the social wage which we are providing to the people, but if the image of South Africa is going to be beamed out in the world as if South Africa is xenophobic because the people ending up trying to take the law into their hands, I think that what percentage must be done to reverse the decline, in particular of the defense force and the police? It's good that it's acknowledged that the police budget is far inadequate. The defense force budget is far inadequate. So for us to have a proper functioning structure, I think the first thing is to defend what we have. I think that's why even in the African continent, almost all the civilization which we had, they collapsed because there was no proper defense force which were going to protect what we had. So with this background which I'm providing here, I'll ask the Commission, more or less, what is the percentage which must be done in spending? Because when you go to the other countries, you have about 2% of the GDP going to the National Defense Force. So because we know that there are competing interests there in South Africa, with what increment must be done annually for the defense force so that it can be fully functional on the side of the Fiscal Commission. I know on the side of the National Treasury, they'll always have pressure. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Hadebe. Honorable Numelo.
Well, thank you very much, Chair, and my greetings to your good self and all the members of the committee. Chairperson, I want to deal on the issue that talks to service delivery. Chairperson, in terms, in slide 24, we talk of water and sanitation infrastructure risk. It reflects significant allocation towards the RBIG, the WIRSAG, and the bulk water infrastructure project. Chairperson, during this year, we had a lot of marches or protests that were protesting on the issue of water. It's Gauteng, it's all over the country. Chairperson, my question, in light of the recurring water infrastructure failure project delayed and also municipality capacity constraint, what intervention is National Treasury persuading to strengthen expenditure efficiency and project delivery in the water and the sanitation sector? Because that's where we are highly challenged, especially in terms of the local government. The other matter which I want to bring to the Treasury and also FFC is the issue of I'm going through this. Social wage versus productive investment. The FFC note the productive sectors such as trade and industry and competition, agriculture and technology, and also small business continue to receive relevantly slower shares on the appropriation. My question to Treasury is, what are the long-term fiscal and departmental risk of maintaining a budget structure that remain heavily weighed towards consumption expenditure and social transfer rather than one which I want to is the issue of basic expenditure. If slide one member is talking that is really it's a shame to see that or to hear that our kids who are in grade 4 cannot read for a meaning. It's something that we must prioritize and make sure that we do the correction on it. The other matter is the issue of Home Affairs. We saw this morning on our TV that there are a lot of people who are repatriating, especially the ones that are going back to their home countries. So digital infrastructure and border management modernization. My question is, how should Parliament evaluate whether the increased allocation towards digital identity system, border management, and civil modernization are improving efficiency, reducing fraud, and strengthening our state capacity? I think these are the questions that I'm having towards Treasury and also FFC. Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, honorable members, for the questions for clarity. I don't see any other hand on the visual platform. Honorable Ngumalo, can you please lower your hand unless if it's something new that you want to raise, my leader, the whole committee whip. Honorable Ngumalo, your hand is still up. Honorable Ngumalo. Okay, thank you very much. Can I now hand over to National Treasury and the FFC to respond to the questions from honorable members? Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. I'm going to ask that my colleagues come in, Dr. Randela, Mr. Janari, to first come in, and then I will wrap up afterwards after them and then hand over to the FFC.
Thanks, Chair and honorable members. I will deal with some of the questions raised, starting with the question on the compensation of employees. It's a question raised by Honorable Brett. How is NT managing compensation of employees in the department? Let me start by indicating that one of the things which was said at the time of MTBPS and the budget, it's early retirement without penalty program, which is targeting labor-intensive departments, especially those ones with compensation of employees challenges. Department like Defense, which is overspending on its compensation of employees, is being targeted by that program. We had phase 1, which was implemented in the last financial year. I think around about 2,900 applications were approved, and that will give us something like 540 million savings. So we need to strike a balance between exiting members and rejuvenation, especially departments in the security cluster. And one of the other intervention is the ghost employees one, which is still underway. And thirdly, as part of managing COE, we have got a 3-wage agreement. I think its lifespan is coming to an end next year. So this year we are certain of the salary adjustment percentage. So we're not going to get surprises. There was a question around how do we make sure that funds are being used for the intended purpose. One of the instruments that we use is earmarking, or specifically and exclusively appropriate funds. And some of those, they come with conditions. So once funds are earmarked, a department cannot use those funds for any other purpose without the approval of the Treasury, if it's earmarked, and if it's specifically and exclusively appropriated without the approval of Parliament. It's one of the mechanisms that we use. And thirdly, let me address the question raised around the capacitation of the criminal justice system. In the previous MTFs, several allocations have been made, starting with the police, to increase police numbers. As we speak today, they will be stabilizing at 188,000 police personnel as a result of additional allocations provided in the previous MTFs. I think that gave them the ability to recruit, I think, around about 30,000 police officials. Coming to defense, defense is one of those departments that got a lot of airtime as part of this budget at different levels, including ministers. They met several times, talking about the same issues that you are raising. This budget, it allocates additional 2.7 billion to the National Defence Force for fixing the aircraft and again, border safeguarding. Important to note, Chair and honorable members, is that outside the appropriation, the minister in the speech also made reference to 1 billion, which has been allocated to defense to deal with organized crime. And again, 1 billion has been allocated to the to police. So that's funding outside what you see as part of appropriation. Funding alone in the defense force, it needs to be complemented by other interventions, like dealing with the exit strategies for undeployable members and other efficiency measures that we are in discussion with defense, given also the policy documents that have been approved. The recent one is Journey to Greatness. Let me end here, Chair. Let me hand over through you to my colleague Spencer. Thanks.
Good morning, Honorable Chair and Honorable members. My name is Spencer Janari, and I'm going to just respond to some of the questions, the infrastructure related questions, or questions about concerns about infrastructure delivery, and some of the measures that the Treasury has introduced or is introducing to try and improve delivery in that regard. So particularly in the education and health spaces, the infrastructure grants to provinces, a performance incentive portion has been set aside to incentivize better performance and planning. We know that planning is a key component to improving the delivery of infrastructure in particular. That's a particular weakness. And so that's one measure that is being introduced to try and push provinces to improve on those aspects. And where that is found to be happening, they get an additional allocation based on their performance, or they get access to that additional incentive portion. That is just being done in those two spheres at the moment, in those two sectors at the moment, and at provincial sphere, and not yet at the municipal sphere, where the capacity is still too disparate between the better performing and underperforming municipalities, and an incentive, a performance incentive program there we think will just favor the currently stronger municipalities. So there there are more attempts at building that capacity first before a similar type of performance incentive can be introduced at municipal level. But that's just one measure to try and stimulate and incentivize, particularly the planning issue, as well as the incentive for overall performance. Furthermore, there's also an infrastructure reporting model, which all infrastructure programs that sectors and provincial departments and national departments are planning to implement have to be loaded onto the system. And the progress in relation to both the spending and the actual delivery is then updated as the projects are being implemented. And it's one way of us being able to keep track of not only how the money is being spent, because that is also done in other ways where there's monthly and quarterly reporting on spending. But here there's now also reporting on the actual delivery and the progress in relation to the delivery. So not only are we trying to ensure that we know exactly what it is that departments are delivering or planning to deliver in terms of infrastructure, we know what they plan to spend on that, and we then can keep track of how much is being spent and how much and how the progress is happening in relation to each of those projects. Of course, these are new, initiatives that are still being bedded down across government. And so some departments and provinces are ahead of others. And of course, it's dependent on, everybody submitting the information as required. The success of the program is dependent on that. But both the performance incentive as well as this infrastructure reporting model are beginning to show signs of improvement in terms of planning at the provincial sphere in health and education, and in terms of delivery and our ability to monitor that delivery and spending through this infrastructure reporting model across government. Thanks. I'll stop there for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson, and good morning, honorable members and colleagues. I will address the questions on Home Affairs from Honorable Nxumalo. When the minister tabled the appropriation bill, he also tabled the 2026 estimates of national expenditure. Within that publication, there are different chapters for different departments, and they explain what these different departments will be spending on. So specifically in relation to Home Affairs, there is an allocation of just above 400 million in 26-27 allocated for the digitization of civic records. I think the colleague from the FFC did allude to that when they presented earlier, because digitizing these records would also assist in eliminating corruption. There is work that the Department of Home Affairs, SARS, and the South African Reserve Bank are currently engaging on regarding the digital identity ecosystem, and around 575 million is allocated to the Department of Home Affairs to assist them with that type of work, to enhance security and also manage the risk of fraud. As I think it was already alluded to earlier in one of the presentations, there's an allocation of around 990 million over the medium term. I think it's just above 300 million in 26-25 to the Border Management Agency to assist them with building capacity to attend to the concerns that the honorable member has raised. Also, within the budget of around more than 2.6 billion in the current year within the Border Management Agency, there is an allocation there that is, or an investment that the agency is making in some of its own systems, including the movement control system and the advanced passenger processing system. I hope that helps to direct the honorable member to access more information around the allocation that Home Affairs has and the Border Management Agency has also to attend to the concerns that have been raised. Thank you.
Okay, Chair, I'm going to just answer the residual questions. So just to Honorable Suisa's questions about broader infrastructure reforms and how do we strengthen planning and the financial management aspects around infrastructure delivery. I mean, there are a few things that we have done since actually the 2025 budget around infrastructure financing reforms. The first would be around to improve planning. I mean, the requirements that we have for assessing projects that comes through the budget facility for infrastructure, for example, is a level higher than what some sectors may have and what they are used to. That would help us understand how they think about planning, what they need to consider in relation to that, in the same way that what are the procurement strategies, the timelines associated with that. We also ask about a risk analysis that highlights all the risks and what the mitigation measures are that at the decision-making process from an investment point of view, that we are able to have better certainty that planning is a lot stronger than what project sponsors are used to. In relation to how do we kind of deal with non-compliance and how frequently do we stop allocations when there are implementation failures? The provisions, and my colleagues would have been here a few weeks ago on the Division of Revenue Bill, and we do have standard provisions in the Division of Revenue Bill around the stopping and reallocation of funds. One of the more important signals, I suppose, of failures around contract management or weak planning because projects are just not going is around spending. So that's the first signal that something's wrong. And when you have that, I mean, we have the mechanisms in place in the Division of Revenue Act, once it is enacted, that allows us to then intervene and understand what is happening before allocations are shifted around. My colleague Spencer had highlighted that we have the infrastructure reporting module, and what we're doing around infrastructure reporting is we're taking that to the next level. We're looking at how we are able to strengthen that system around infrastructure reporting that would allow us to understand when things go wrong a lot better and earlier in the process. That would allow for, say, for example, when you have weak contract management, this is when projects are over time and over budget, that we are able to kind of deal with the accountability mechanisms that's provided for both in the PFMA for accounting officers in terms of Section 38 of the PFMA for departments, in terms of Section 51 of the PFMA for public entities, and the national transferring officer responsibilities in the Division of Revenue when we deal with conditional grants. Just on the salaries of officials, Honorable Brits, I mean, Dr. Randela had dealt with the issues that we have around the ghost worker audit we're doing the multi-year wage agreements and the early retirement programs. On your question around data and what are we doing around getting better data, a large part of this really deals with capacity of Stats SA. And we have provided in the 2025 adjustments budget some additional allocations for Stats SA to build some capacity, and the carry through of that is provided for in the 2026 Appropriation Bill. In relation to disasters, There are a few things that I think are important to note around disasters. We have flexible mechanisms, both in the Division of Revenue Act and in the Appropriation Act, around the reprioritization of funds. One of the things that we are looking at is, and the Department of Cooperative Governance, together with the National Disaster Management Center, is looking at a whole review of the disaster management system. And it is quite complex because of the way our intergovernmental system is structured. So the vertical and the horizontal relationships between sectors and the Provincial Disaster Management Center and the National Disaster Management Center does require strengthened coordination. But we have a couple of mechanisms that we are able to use from a budgeting point of view. In the Division of Revenue Act, where you do have declared disasters, there are provisions made for how you could use conditional allocations to alleviate the damage from those disasters. Then we also use the contingency reserve, and the provisions in relation to the appropriation bill is in section 6 that I had presented earlier, where the Minister of Finance may, up to the levels in the contingency reserve, approve allocations beyond what is allocated in each of those votes for unforeseeable and unavoidable expenditure, and under exceptional circumstances that will hinder service delivery. So the flexibility to use to call on the contingency reserve in the appropriation bill is provided for, and those are the mechanisms that we then use to deal with this. From a procurement point of view, we've issued an instruction note, I think as far back as 2020, that devolves procurement policy to relevant departments, and they are empowered to have their own emergency procurement policies and provisions that would allow them to respond to disasters a lot quicker than following the normal procurement process. As long as it is consistent with their policy, they are able to do that. In relation to transfers on conditional grants and what additional support and measures do we have, there are a few that I think that are important to consider here. The first is there's a role of the National Transferring Officer that's set out in each of those conditional grant frameworks. For example, in the Human Settlements Development Grant Framework, the department must approve a business plan from each of the provinces on how they are going to deploy their allocations. The provisions around all of that requires the department to be a lot more vigilant. In some instances, they assess that against what they call a project readiness assessment matrix that would allow them to check that this delivery happens in a specific way and happens according to the plan. The other mechanisms that we have, and I didn't highlight it in my presentation, but one of the things you would have seen around the top 10 allocations around payments for capital assets was the Department of Cooperative Governance popping up on there. That shows a significant component, or not a significant, but a larger component of the municipal infrastructure grant that becomes an indirect grant, in the same way that the indirect components that we have for the regional bulk infrastructure grant means that the national departments then able to employ or deploy implementing agents to do work on behalf of municipalities. So you're able to then use central capacity that may sit within a water board, within the DBSA, within the municipal infrastructure support agent to plan and contract and implement on behalf of that municipality. And when that infrastructure is complete, it then gets transferred. So a lot more of that we will see come through the system in the same way that we have with the regional bulk infrastructure grant for water and sanitation. In relation to Honorable Swartz's question around the transfers and subsidies and how confident are we around who gets this and what are the measurable service delivery outcomes? I mean, there are a couple of components here that we have to think about, and they all have come with different rules. So, for example, the social grants allocations that we have, which makes up by far the most significant expenditure item in the appropriation bill, we've introduced in the 2025 budget, and we're continuing with that. So the conditions, so once this bill is enacted and the Minister of Finance is empowered to set conditions on these allocations, we will continue with the conditions that we have set in the 2025 appropriation, in terms of the 2025 Appropriation Act, around strengthened verification of grant beneficiaries, that would ensure that, or that minimizes and reduces fraud in the system. in the same way that we then introduce conditions for other kind of service delivery measures on information that we then get from departments in relation to their own performance. We will be doing that for some of the more significant allocations that we have in the budget. For example, the infrastructure allocations that goes to the DBSA, the additional allocations that goes to PRASA for signaling, and those measurable service delivery outcomes. We also include, as my colleague Mokhatla had alluded to on the example around what's in the estimates of national expenditure, we do set out those performance indicators that's aligned to each of those departments and entities' annual performance plans and corporate plans that then gives us a sense of what it is that they are expected to buy with this money and whether they have achieved that. I'm hoping I've already addressed the issues around weak project prep and the reforms that we've introduced. It's similar to Honorable Suisa's question. Again, my colleague had already answered on the COE. In relation to the allocations for PRASA, and what kind of, how should the committee think about how to kind of track service delivery? So as I just said, we do publish performance indicators and performance information for PRASA in the estimates of national expenditure. But I think one of the important things to track and what the kind of indicators that we are, given the investments that we are making on rail, would be things like the extent to which these new trains are deployed. That is dependent on signaling systems working and the additional allocations that we have on the transport vote for PRASA is exactly to address that. That would mean that you get more trains in the system. So those headways means that you can run more trains more often. And how we track that would be around what happens to passenger growth, what happens to trains that are on time, and how many trains are then deployed in the system are some of those indicators that we then look at in relation to rail services. Then on just questions around the social wage and the sustainability and around job creation, I mean, one of the things that the budget highlights is how redistributive the budget actually is. But to deal with the issues that both Honorable Khadebe and Honorable Numalo has raised in relation to this trade-off or the choices that we make in relation to productive investment and social wage, there's a couple of things that I think is important to consider. For example, in relation to infrastructure investment, so even though we know that we have to expand public sector infrastructure investment, public sector investment as a percentage of total gross fixed capital investment in the national income accounts is relatively small. The largest sector, the largest section or component of gross fixed capital formation in the national income accounts actually comes from the private sector. To make that happen means that you need to do the enabling infrastructure is what the public sector does. And that's the focus on kind of spending money on roads, because if you spend the money on roads, then you're able to get the farmers are able to invest in their farms. The miners are able to invest in capital investments on the mines. That means that we can, roads and rail, can get those goods to market. And that's the relationship around all of that. So that's the one aspect. The other component around all of this is a regulatory component. How do we lower barriers to entry that makes it easier for small businesses to come in? How do we reduce the cost of doing businesses? And while for the Department of Small Business or Trade and Industry, a lot of that is a regulatory component that would enable investment in the same way that while we have the support on the budget for the junior miners for the exploration fund, a large component to unlock investment in mining is really around who has exploration rights. Now, that's a small component of the budget, and it's a very small expenditure item to have a cadastral system and a licensing and registration system that works relative to the amount of investment that it is able to unlock. So some of those choices that we do make and the trade-offs that we make in relation to what we invest on the productive capacity of the economy are small amounts of money that has a big impact. This specifically relates to some of the regulatory work that we have to do and how we then enable miners and farmers, etc., to be able to access this. The larger components of that you will see from an economic infrastructure point of view. Some of that sits on budget, like what we're seeing with Transnet. But what it also does, it unlocks private sector investment into that infrastructure in the same way that how Sandrail contracts on the N3 or the N4 that brings in private sector investment that then grows. So it's a small amount of investment that then capitalizes and allows us to exponentially use the balance sheets of the private sector to grow the pot. So it may not necessarily be that we spend a lot less on productive capacity in the economy. It just means that on the one hand, we're able to leverage a lot more, and on the other hand, it's small amounts of money that deals with big impact. Then just the last point I just want to make around the security cluster and infrastructure requirements in the security cluster, so specifically in relation to the BMA. One of the things we wrote to the Department of Home Affairs about is saying that is highlighting to them that the infrastructure process we have around the budget facility for infrastructure, for example, which has traditionally seen traditional infrastructure projects, roads, transport, education, health come into the system, is that we've written to each of the security cluster departments and said, for infrastructure upgrades, we are willing to use the other reform I didn't mention was the merger of the advisory components around infrastructure in the National Treasury with the infrastructure fund to create what we call the Infrastructure Financing and Implementation Support Agency as a facility that provides technical support that will allow these entities to come into the BFI. That would mean that so for the upgrades in the Defence Force, police infrastructure, the BMA's infrastructure at the ports of entry will then all get special support, and we're offering special support that would allow them to come into the budget facility of infrastructure that would allow us to then increase investments in infrastructure in those sectors. I'm going to stop there. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much. National Treasury, are you done with the responses, or is there anything? Is Meharik on the platform? Okay. FFC, Dr. Mbava.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Chairperson. Let me appreciate the questions from all the members. Maybe I just wanted to just touch on one question, which I think is very important. The fact that we spend a large chunk of our budget on the social wage. I think, Chair and members, maybe we need to look at that in the context of where we are as a country. If you were to listen yesterday to the budget vote of Stats SA, we were told that more than 50% of households in South Africa right now depend on some form of social grant. So this social grant provide a lifeline. They make a difference whether someone goes to bed with a plate of food or not. We know that about 26.5 million of South Africans are the beneficiaries of social grants. 26.5 million of South Africans receive some form of social grant. And rightfully so, Chair, we have to take care of our elderly. We have to take care of our war veterans. We have to take care of our orphans. We have to take care of our children. And that is the bulk of these social grants where these go to. What is concerning, though, is that we have about 8 million working age South Africans who are the recipients of the social relief grant, the SRD grant. These are people who should be gainfully employed, and they are benefiting from the 370 Rand per month. I think the bigger conversation we must ask ourselves is that 36.4 billion has been put aside for the SRD grant up until March next year. How sustainable is that? If every year we have to have almost 40 billion set aside for people who should be gainfully employed. Yes, there are young people out there who are struggling to find work, and the SRD grant does provide some sort of lifeline. But the question is it sustainable? So the question we have to ask then is, what is the long-term solution for the social relief grant, which is funded at approximately 36 billion every year? And what do we do with the army of young people who are reliant on it year in, year out? Granted, many young people have used the grant to start their own businesses. We've had that. But I think as a government, we have to find a permanent solution with regards to how do we sustain this. And I think, as the colleague from Treasury has mentioned, I think one of the key areas we can do this to make sure that the right beneficiary gets the right grant in the right amount is to ensure that we have verification systems in place, is to ensure that we have compliance. We need to know who are these recipients of these social grants. Because if we don't know that, then this allocation will mushroom year in, year out. But what we must be aware of is that social grants are a constitutional right. We have to take care of our disabled. We have to take care of our poor. We have to take care of our elderly. We have to take care of our orphans. We have to do that. So we must have social grants. But the question is, it must be sustainable. It must be the right people. There must be no fiscal leakages. There must be no money which is supposedly being received by people who are not qualified to receive that. So this issue then of the social wage being skewed at this particular point in our economy, it is because this is where we are as a country. It is because of our developmental outcomes as a country. It is because of our high unemployment rate. It is because we are making this choice. Remember, a budget is also a reflection of the choices we are making as a country. And we are saying that we will provide a safety net to our people. No one must go to bed hungry under our government. That is a choice we're making. But having said that, we also need to ensure that we have verification systems in place. We have compliance systems in place to ensure that there is no money that is going to the wrong hands. But social grants are a right. They are a constitutional right. We have to provide a safety net as a country. But the bigger question that I want to raise is that we need to address the SRD grant and have a permanent solution, because right now there is still no reform around it. Every year we keep on extending the SRD grant for another year at a cost of approximately 36 billion to 40 billion a year. I'm going to pause there, Chair, and I'm going to ask the research. Before I ask the research team, I note that there is Commissioner Fowler, which I saw his name. I'm not sure if he's still on the platform. He might want to have a comment or a thought on these matters before I give the platform to the research team? Commissioner Fowler.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the Chair of the committee for the opportunity. I want to touch on, just to follow on what Dr. Mbava is saying, that generally there has to be this balance between the social spending and spending on economic infrastructure, economic development, as well as in the case of municipalities on maintenance, etc. And one of the balancing acts that has happened over the years is that we've tended to take money from maintenance and spend it on other things. So, for example, in the case of municipalities, Treasury has a rule of thumb that says 8 to 10% should be spent on maintenance of infrastructure. Now, if that is not consistently spent over a period of time, you then have to refurbish the infrastructure, which means that you have to spend even more money than if you had maintained it. With regard to staffing, certainly in the municipal environment, it's about 35% that is the cap. And for economic, rule of thumb for economic investment, meaning development of roads, water, but particularly to facilitate economic development, which is the role of municipalities, that is 35%. And if you look at the total now, you're up to 80% already, which means 20% for development, which is in fact not adequate. So it's a balance between these aspects that you have to spend and figure out how you're going to ensure that you provide basic services, also to ensure that you develop economic infrastructure. Just to note that National Treasury has introduced for the metro something called the metro trading reforms, which is to ensure that they have entities that deal with water, whether they're business entities or actual entities that are put in place with boards, etc. For electricity, you have entities for that and entities for waste, to ensure that the money that is raised in those areas are in fact spent in that environment. And Treasury has in fact provided an incentive to ensure that that happens. However, the challenge is that achieving that is a little more, it's not quite as easy as just having that happen, because you have to balance between this, and some of the entities are not in fact meeting those targets because there are other mandates, for instance, such as primary healthcare. In many of the metros, they have clinics which provide 24-hour service in some areas for primary healthcare, where people don't have to go to a hospital and go to a clinic to pick up their medication and get that area addressed, which primary healthcare is largely preventative and to ensure that people don't end up in the hospital. But what has happened is that the number of clinics and the extent of the program, which is a provincial and national function, is now being undertaken at metro level, and they're being underfunded by at least a third in that regard. So if you take the example of Ekurhuleni or Johannesburg, between them, I think it's about R1 billion they're underfunded in this regard. So it's an area of balancing those various areas to ensure that you're able to address it. And then the last area that I just wanted to comment on, the question of defense spending. In 1994, there was this idea that we would move from from swords to plowshares, using an analogy, meaning going from military equipment to moving towards productive areas that will provide food, etc. But over a period of time, our defense spending has in fact been low, and I think there is something that we should all look at, that this targeting by the USA of South Africa and saying that there is genocide against white people in the country is something that is a real danger for us, because the United States has taken very aggressive stands around the world on many developing countries. And so it's an area that we need to be concerned about. Let me then just conclude there by saying that, as Dr. Mbava has indicated, we have to have this balance. And so when you are spending a lot on social spending, you still have to be ensure that you spend on the economic infrastructure. And at times, it may be less on social spending and more on economic infrastructure, because you need to grow the economy so that in the long term, you can reduce your funding on social expenditure because you've created jobs, etc. So that is the balance that I think we're at that point where some difficult decisions have to be made in that regard. Thank you very much. And let me turn it back over to Dr. Mbava, who will then direct where it would go from here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Fowler. Can I hand over to the head of research, Chen, and your team to just handle the technical questions? Thanks.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to honourable members and Chair for the questions. Let me proceed quickly then to some of the more specific parts. South Africa's budget has become too consumption-focused. Yes, in short, but it's also worthwhile to perhaps elaborate on how has it become too consumption-focused. And I think it is starting to emerge or has become the case that even on something that is simple as a procurement, our procurement process, it's said to procure, but it's ultimately consumption-based, to the extent that they're across all of the contracts and all of the infrastructure deliveries, majority of which are essentially operated through these procurement contracts and service providers, ultimately means that government itself does not produce. It has got no idea what it is supposed to produce or how to produce. Even to say, fix the roads, fix the pipes, or even putting on light bulbs. These things, they all need to go through procurements, which becomes consumption-based. So from a productivity perspective, so there we go, and it's also, and it shows up in the numbers, right? So, as earlier colleagues from the National Treasury is accurate, that actually most of the investments and the growth or gross domestic product in terms of productivity, it's actually mostly driven by the private sector in South Africa. South African public sector, and in terms of the budgets and appropriation, especially at the national sphere, unfortunately has ultimately become too consumption-based, and it's also not just national, but also provincial and local. But I think it stands out slightly more at the national level in terms of the appropriation bill is because also it has to do with the way that our spheres of government and intergovernmental relations is structured by the Constitution, in that national is supposed to be dealing mostly with policies, implementation as ultimately across the board become overly burdened by even, say, implementations of developmental focused activities done by SOEs. And we all know that SOEs and public entities. They essentially all do procurements to produce. And next question on the inconsistencies, which departments? Unfortunately, I think it's across the board, but different in different natures, including, but I will say, like to put in a priority that National Treasury is, we can assimilate with National Treasury in that regard. I'm saying that essentially inconsistencies actually also happens at National Treasury in that 24-25 actual expenditure was underspending, but the allocations to 2026 is over allocation. So there is ultimately inconsistencies across the board for all departments, not a single department that is free from it or excluded from it. It's just in different manners and or for different reasons. In National Treasury's case, it's because there's a certain pot of money that other departments don't want to do and don't want to implement and don't want to spend. So they even reject receiving the money. And that's how the money became National Treasury's problem, which leads to the some of the more, shall we say, implementation issues, like, for example, infrastructure delivery collapse. Well, we wanted to, and also drawing from our research of the FFC on infrastructure delivery and implementation, and also in association with the budget inconsistencies and poor management of the public finance, is that we heard about incentives, right? That's the carrot, but where's the stick? Well, the stick is supposed to operate through the monitoring and evaluation of not just expenditure, but also of actually what did we get. And unfortunately, we would like to and also assist Treasury in thinking that you can't do this by yourself about monitoring and evaluation of even infrastructure delivery issues. Where is Department of Planning, Monitoring, and Evaluation? Where are they? They are supposed to also help National Treasury in knowing where infrastructure deliveries are not happening, or departments that's supposed to reach their targets or achieve their supposed targets and control its performance or ensure their performance by spending. They are nowhere to feature. So I think from a infrastructure, and this is where I say that if you see, through our research, we also can assimilate with the National Treasury in understanding their position, in that National Treasury have pretty much done all it can in terms of from funding perspective. But the stick, the doing, the implementation, it's not fair and it's not equal, right? To also lay all of that onto Treasury to do, whilst the function and the mandates of ensuring performance is lying elsewhere, DPME. So this is a particular issue. On the issue of ghost workers, just want to advise there, and I'd like to refer you to our next divisional revenue annual submission on the for the divisional revenue that would be 27-28, that is due to publish imminently by the end of this Friday latest. In terms of the Intergovernmental Fiscal Relations Act, there's a chapter in there that we conducted research on, specifically about dealing with ghost workers. And we realized from the research, we realized how significant, I'm talking about the technical research results, not about the recommendations, that is under embargo until Friday. But what we found is essentially that from the budgeting instruments of estimate of national expenditure, I think the DDG, the National Treasury would appreciate this, is the instrument. But when one compares that with the administrative data of per cell, that's when you see the incredible discrepancies. And that discrepancy is essentially meaning that money reaches its destination, but it's not spent or it's not allocated. And even if it's spent, we have no there is no evidence of alignment between supposedly actual bodies of per cell, which is the salary advice to individuals in the public sector service, to your budgets and the allocated amounts. That is a big enough a problem. Then we haven't even gotten to the actual per cell itself. Are these people actually doing work for having received the money that they've received through salary advice? That is so incredibly this limitations and the gap in between, it's very, very large, especially when it comes to subnational spheres of governments. I shall stop there. And also, but just to say that, so we are dealing with budgeting data, right? And per cell, which are administrative, individual tracked data. Stats SA survey data is not going to help here. You need what one needs is we need is a review of alignments to ensure alignments between administrative data and with budgeting data. And hopefully once that is done, we need to get into, as I said, the actual performance. We need to actually call these workers onto at least a video call to see that you are actually existing. And that is, yes, done in part by the auditing process of the Auditor General. And I think to end off there, lastly, is that yes, we do prefer outcomes over allocations, especially on things like education and these social services as part of the social wage, as my chairperson correctly said, emphasized. The sustainability of social wage in any country, in any nation, throughout its economic history is to ensure outcomes over just throwing more money at it. There are various structures to it, but when it comes to sustainability or how long does this system can maintain itself, one has to look at the actual outcomes, and which again leads back to the whole DPME. Why do we have it? Are they doing it? But more so is, yes, South Africa, I think in the past 20, even say 30 years since democracy, education sector, health sector has consistently been suffering from this overemphasis on, oh, we need more money, we need more money, we need more money. But what has it delivered? I think that's the question that is still standing today. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much. I think, Chair, we're going to hand over back to you, unless there are other questions we have missed. But I think on our side, we hand over to you. Thank you so much, Chair.
Thank you very much. The doctor. Can I check, honorable members, if there is any? Okay, Honorable Khadebe. I see the hand of Honorable Khadebe.
No, thank you, Honorable Chairperson. I cannot agree more with Dr. Mbava when coming to the issue of the social wage. But it is critical because you cannot, of course, the Constitution gives each and every South African citizen an inherent right to dignity. A person cannot have a dignity when that person will never know where the next plate of food is going to come from. A person cannot have dignity when that person will not know when he's going to get the next soap to bath for himself, or herself. We cannot agree more with that. No. But what we're saying that in the long term, the issue of these grants are not sustainable. What is sustainable is the productive jobs which the people must get. Hence, we say, once I say from where I'm seated and from the organization I'm coming from, is that the issue of growing the economy must be done as of yesterday. The issue of absorbing the youth into the job sector must come as of yesterday. But when you look what is happening right now, is that you go to any petrol station here around Cape Town, you go and see who are the petrol jockeys. The petrol jockeys are usually the people who are not from this country. And the job of a petrol jockey is not a scarce skill. It's not a scarce skill. Some of the employers actually can be so arrogant, and they can say that the South Africans are lazy, they don't want to work. But what they are doing, they don't want to pay the minimum wage. They don't want to do that. So what does that mean? It means that if we cannot ensure that our borders are properly monitored, so that the people who are not supposed to be here are not here. I'll make a very simple example. You go to the Department of Employment and Labor, there's a list of scarce skills, the skills which are needed by the economy so that the people can be able to contribute meaningfully, even if they come outside the country. But you go to the restaurants, the issue of waitrons and waiters, is it a scarce skill? Go around Cape Town here. Go to the various restaurants and see who's serving that. But what we say is that, yes, it does not mean that we are going to have job reservation only for South Africans. But let those people who are inside the country be the ones who are legal, who came into the country legally, who have the right documentation to go and do the work. That one must be done. You go, I'm from the Free State. I'm traveling between Free State and Mpumalanga. You go to the farms there, the issue of farm laborers is not a scarce skill. But when you go deep down there, you'll find that the farmers will employ the foreign nationals. And most of the time, those foreign nationals, what do they have? They don't have proper documentation. It means that the issue of the minimum wage is thrown out of the window. So that's why we say that we must have this balance. The sooner we ensure that we monitor our borders properly, the sooner we ensure that we bring down the crime. You go and look what is happening there at OR Time International or to our ports of entry. The amount of drugs which are being smuggled into the country, the amount of drugs which are being smuggled in the country, the hijackings and kidnappings which are happening inside the country. So will the other business people from the other countries be willing to invest in an economy where there's a high crime rate? The answer is no. You go even here in the suburbs, some of the people are even afraid to hire the domestic workers and the gardeners, because they say that in most of the times, the people who go and bargain and commit crime there are the people who usually were employed there. But what you find again is that those people didn't have documents. When they were supposed to be paid, they got fired, and then they come back because they know the system. So what is critical here is that, yes, we must protect our country. I'll make another example. If we don't spend enough on the Navy, we know very well that there are boats which come as far away from South Korea and come and fish in our waters here. So basically what happens is that those marine resources which belong to the South Africans, which can bring a lot of forex, people are able to get in and steal and take away. Even some boats even come from Brazil. From Brazil, because they come, because if we don't give that capacity, to the security services, really this country is going to be overrun. I cannot say with this issue of anti-immigration, illegal immigration marches which are there in the country. The images which they portray to South Africa is doing a reputational damage which is so high for the country. But if we can bring that stability, ensure that those people who are supposed to be here, so that our people cannot be even, they must not have a need to go and protect themselves. Because when you go to some of these RDP houses which are there, you find that People from Pakistan, come on, man. A person, even if there's war in Bangladesh, there's war, but you look at the number of kilometers these people move from that side to come into the township and take over the tax shops which are there. So I think that we must have that balance. So that's why I'm appealing. I'm very happy with the response which coming to the issue of the defense budget and the police, but we must do that as of yesterday. The issue of social security is very important. I was once in the queue where people were going to get their social grants. The system crashed. One lady was crying. You know why she was crying? She said, they expected me when I go home, I'll come with a maize meal. It was so sad. It was so sad. That's why I said, hey, I have to speak with somebody. Please, can you raise something so that you can go take something quick? So we appreciate the issue of the importance of having this net. But what is wrong now? We invested so much in education. The people who are having degrees have to go and get SRT now. That's why that if we employ enough labor inspectors, yes, in the current budget, 10,000 are going to be employed, as the president said. But let us be honest, 10,000 labor inspectors for the whole country, which they must monitor the private homes where there are domestic workers, they have to monitor the farms. In that one municipality can have thousands of farms, and then we have the industries, whatever. So it means that the sooner we secure the country, the better for us. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Honorable Hadebe. You have said mouthful, and I don't think that you need any response. You were just giving direction and also the inputs on a discussion that was on the table. And let me also, also join Dr. Mbava by also greeting Commissioner Fowler. We couldn't acknowledge you, Commissioner. Thank you for also joining the meeting. Honorable members, the special thanks to the National Treasury for responding to the questions of honorable members. The leadership of FFC under the leadership of Dr. Mbava and Commissioner Fowler, the honorable members on the visual platform who joined us, so the chair of chairs and the House Chair, Mr. Honorable Hadebe, thanks very much for joining us. Honorable members, this brings us to the end of the meeting, and I'm also going to report to the chairperson of the committee, Honorable Luhase, that the meeting went well, and then we're able to respond, the National Treasury and FFC were able to respond to the questions of the members, and there was no member who were not satisfied. Thank you, honorable members. The meeting stands adjourned. Thank you. So my apologies. I'm going now to allow the FFC and the National Treasury to leave the platform. Else I will be remaining with the committee members to deal with the minutes. You see, sometimes when the meeting is not yours, you make mistakes. My apologies, honorable members.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye, Commissioner. Mr. Nodada, can you please flag the agenda, then we'll deal with the minutes. My apologies for earlier remarks on the closing of the meeting. My apologies, members.
Chairperson, thank you very much, Chairperson and honorable members. I've uploaded the minutes. They are on the screen, Chair. But I don't know, Chair, whether the committee wishes to proceed with considering these minutes. It's only one set. We're thinking that because the Chairperson submitted an apology and logged off, maybe the committee might decide to end the meeting early and consider this one set of minutes next week. but it's up to the committee to decide. But that's our proposal.
Honorable Ryder, Honorable Hadebe.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, look, I think it's straightforward. It's a set of minutes. It's on the screen. Let's do it. They're good minutes as usual. So I don't think there should be controversy.
Okay, that's the House Chair. Honorable Hadebe.
No, thank you, Chairperson. I'll concur with my colleague, Honorable Ryder. There's no chance here. We're dealing with the mandates and it's straightforward. I think that if we're correcting, let us adopt them so that we get them out of the way. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, another House Chair. We are, you know what, this committee, I like it because we are guided by the leadership of the House. So there's no way that we can make a mistake. 2 House Chairs in this committee. Yeah. Mr. Nodded, are we correcting? Are we still correcting?
Chairperson, the last time I checked, yes, unless maybe there's been some update in the last few minutes.
Page 1. Page 1.
Okay, Chairperson, page 1. Just a second, Chair. Thank you, Chairperson. Thank you, honorable members. This is page 1, honorable members.
Page 2.
That's page. Sorry, Chair.
Page 4. Page 5. Thank you. I was only looking for the move and the seconder from Majon because he was having the clear mandate. Those are the minutes that have been presented. Chair of Chairs.
Thank you, Chairperson. Based on the fact that it was my insistence, I'm going to then move for the adoption of these minutes as a true reflection of the meeting. Thank you to the team.
Yes, and I will second the adoption of the minutes.
Thank you. Thank you very much. The Honorable Ryder move, Honorable Hadebe second. I think that's it. Mr. Nodada.
That's correct, Chairperson. Thank you so much, Chairperson. Thank you so much, honorable members and colleagues. Over to you, Chair.
Thank you. And let me take this opportunity to thank you for attending this meeting. And also, as you know that Honorable Lahase, who's the chairperson of Appropriation, is now being studying. So it's the first day at school today. So she couldn't attend to this meeting because she must do the orientation. And as you know that if there is any way, we must be able to avail ourselves for the work of the committee to continue. And then thanks for members for allowing me to to drive this ship and do their support and making sure that at least we are able to get what we're supposed to receive, the briefing from the National Treasury and also the FFC. With those few words, honorable members, a special thank you to the team led by Mr. Nodada, and thank you very much, and the meeting stands adjourned.